So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and it pleases me to say that this one is going to be on the test build for 0.97, and it's going to be between three of the human factions. We have the Black Numenorians in this corner, who are going to be played by Dreezy 4K, obviously Umbar. We have the standard humans, basically, the middlemen, who are going to be played by Kuroguro-chan, which of course is the Kingdom of Cardlin. And finally, we have the Kingdom of Men that has a bit of elven blood in their veins. We have the Principality of Dol Amroth, which is going to be played by Starling. Now, it's worth saying as well that the reason why I'm recording this now, before things get changed a little bit, is in the upcoming weekend there is going to be a few changes made to the build, and in particular, one faction which is going to be getting a lot of changes. It's going to be this one over here, and that's going to be Umbar, and really it comes down to a bit of an overhaul of what they are all about as a faction. Like, a lot of the Corsair units are either going to be removed or substantially changed. And I feel as though that's to sort of try and overhaul their lower tier to try and make it a little bit more usable, because at the moment, you know, Umbar will very rarely deviate from having a very solid core of their Castamir's Legion and then supporting that with a few other units. There's also going to be a few changes to sort of individual units as well. So for example, I'm sure that they're around here somewhere, I'm sure that at least one unit of them, yes indeed. Over here, the Abrazani Narduzagar will be changing from a heavy swordsman to a heavy axeman, so they'll be trading in their large sort of two-handed, not really scimitars, but sort of curved greatswords for a big axe, which of course will mean that they will be a little bit less skillful in the future, so their defensive skill will go down, and ultimately that will impact their melee defense, but it will also give them AP, which, interestingly enough, is something which a lot of the Numenorian Inheritor factions, Umbar included, don't tend to have a huge amount of, generally speaking. Gondor have got a little bit, you know, Dol Amroth don't have much, Arthedain don't have much, you know, it's something which they do lack a little bit. It is also worth saying as well that the Balagaya Halberds will be changing from a halberdier to a pike unit, so they will become Balagaya pikemen instead of halberds, which will give them, I think this is because the Corsair pikemen are being removed, which of course means they are going to need a sort of standard pike on the front line, so their halberds are being sacrificed for that. But overall, having a look at the changes to Umbar, I think it will make them a bit stronger, and it will also make them a little bit less predictable, because at the moment the very similar armies crop up from Umbar, and obviously that centres around how strong their Castamir's Legion are, which they will be remaining as strong as they are at the moment, but it's all about giving Umbar, I think, a few more options with regards to what they can actually do, because at the moment they are maybe a little bit too predictable. But speaking of which, let's actually have a look at their army composition, and I think this obviously came before the Umbar changes were decided upon, and Dreezy, you know, to sort of make a point, I suppose, is not going to be bringing any Castamir's Legion. Instead, he is going to be centering his army almost entirely around the Abrazanim and the Balagaya units. So at the front he has the Abrazani Nadubawi with the armour upgrades. Even in 0.96 they were very, very effective in a skirmish fight. That's only going to be even more so the case in 0.97, with the fact that the more expensive archers in particular, the more heavily armoured ones, are going to be made a lot more useful, obviously with their shield value as well. Very, very good in a skirmish fight, and obviously when they're out of ammunition, they're pretty good as line infantry as well. Obviously not quite on the same level as a lot of the other Umbar options with how good their heavy infantry is, but even so, a bit of extra strength in the late game when you could potentially need it. Then a front line made up of the Balagaya unit, so we have a combination of the footmen and the halberds. Again, armour upgrades are abound here. And again, you know, the spears, more effective in 0.97, so they will still be forming mostly the same role here as just being sort of there for their mass and their formations, but obviously the extra damage against cavalry is also going to be very helpful. It's unlikely that cavalry would want to charge in here though, especially with the Balagaya halberds there, so good AP for the time being, but of course the Balagaya halberds will not be a part of Umbar much longer, and they will be trading that in for pikes, so do bear that in mind as this battle progresses. Over here in the middle, we do not have the general over here, but it is going to be the Naaru Royal Guard. Again, the buffs to spearmen will impact these guys as well, so it'll make them even more deadly against cavalry and melee. But other than that, very much the same sort of thing here. Multiple HP, very, very resilient in a skirmish fight, and obviously then not half bad in melee either, even if the spear malice will affect them. And then back here, a couple of units of the upgraded Abrazanim and Nadu Tariq. Again, AP, not necessarily, you know, the last word in terms of their melee defense. They do suffer a little bit in terms of skill, but with the changes to the Narduzagar also becoming two-handed axemen, this should give Umbar the potential to lay down a very, very powerful AP army with a combination of the Nadu Tariq and of course the new version of the Narduzagar. So it does fit because a lot of the other evil men factions, particularly from the east, do tend to have quite a lot of AP options. You know, obviously Khand, Rune, and Harad. So Umbar getting a little bit more in terms of those tools, I think, which will give them a reason to not just spam Castamir's Legion. Because of course, when these guys over here, the Narduzagar, are the two-handed axemen, it will allow them to build an army more focused around cutting through armour, which obviously for some factions are very reliant on that, such as Gondor and both of the Dwarven factions that are currently in the game. But for the time being, for this battle here, the Narduzagar are still heavy swordsmen, so the defensive skill is still going to be the main attraction there on both sides. And then finally, the General's Bodyguard we can see over there, Castamir in his golden armour. We actually also have, I think, our Farazon here at the front, so there's two lads in golden armour. But we have the Alcarondas Faithful, which of course are one of the new melee knights that have been added to the game. Again, it's a unit that Umbar share with the new faction that is Numenor. Very, very powerful. Not a lot of unit models, however, so you do need to be careful, and this is going to be the main drawback to Umbar's cavalry. They're very, very elite, but they're going to be very small in number. You know, the Alcarondas Faithful, obviously, powerful, and Umbar can go toe-to-toe with Dol Amroth's elites in terms of cavalry, but Dol Amroth can really leverage a few more numbers on horseback. Now, though, let's go and have a look at Cardolan, played by Kuro Guro-chan, obviously the men from the west here, part of the fallen kingdom of Arnor. We have the sort of the new upgrade, well, the new models, I should say, because it's not an armour upgrade, it's just what they look like now, for the Miniscarithlin units, the Miniscarithlin spearmen here on the front. Sort of buys into their Numenorian heritage a little bit more, so their helms sort of look like dusty relics from the kingdom of Numenor, so it sort of brings them into line a little bit more, because the cattle hats looked kind of neat in the last patch, but they weren't really fitting of what Cardolan actually are. So it's good to see that they've been changed, and I think they look much better for this now. I think they fit much more with what Cardolan is supposed to be. And there's 3 units of these spearmen here on the front, forming a sort of front line here to ward off enemy cavalry potentially, but also pretty good front line, you know, good mass. Again, it will ward off enemy cavalry. Cardolan in general's got pretty good armour values, especially on their Miniscarithlin units. Obviously, in places for their lower tier units, such as their pikes, not so much, but the Miniscarithlin units do make a pretty solid core, even if their armour cannot be upgraded. A little bit further back here, it's worth saying as well that Cardolan, overall as a faction, I think will always be slightly more challenging to play, because of the lower morale and because of the fact that you have to be a little bit more careful with your cav, even if Kuro's brought a huge amount of cav back there. We'll go through that in a moment, but Cardolan, I think, are going to be one of the more challenging kingdoms of men to play, just because of the lower morale and because of the fact that you can't rely on the same tools that some of the other kingdoms of men do, but you do have different ones. Your lancers are all very, very efficient, and also you do have a large amount of crossbows, which a lot of the other kingdoms of men do not have access to at all. We've got the Dunedain captains here in the middle, obviously General's Bodyguard unit, heavy swordsman, bodyguard tier with the multiple HP. They do not have their armour upgrades in this case, but I don't think this is actually where the general is, indeed it isn't. But obviously very similar to stuff like the Haven Guard, which we may very well be seeing from Dol Amroth. We've got the Hearthguard of Amon Sul. This is the general, and we will be seeing a little bit more of this from Cardolan. Obviously this is the test build, so this sort of thing is liable to happen. We have some Silver Surfers on the field today. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul, a very key part of Cardolan moving forward, because they are one of the units which can buff the morale of nearby men. So if you have these guys at the centre of your army, not only will they be able to engage in skirmish fights with their very thick armour, very good shield value, and obviously decent missile damage for being a bodyguard tier archer unit. Also, those spears will make it so that cavalry cannot just charge into them and wipe them all out as easily as they would like, but also they're going to keep units like the Miniscarithlin spearmen fighting for as long as they possibly can. And then we have really the heart and soul of Cardolan, maybe a little bit predictable for them to bring a lot of the time, but we have the Miniscarithlin sharpshooters, because of course crossbows, very much the strength that Cardolan can leverage that several of their peers cannot. Very good at zoning out cavalry, also very good at hitting high value infantry if they can get into the right position, but also the sharpshooters can also double as line infantry, and not any old line infantry. They pull out maces, which makes them AP. Now obviously as a dedicated infantry unit they won't be quite as strong as the Abrazani Nadu Tariq across the way, but they will still be able to do the same job in addition to using those crossbows as well, so a very important part of the Cardolan roster, as are these guys over here of course. The Minotaur Roman Guardians, they are like the sharpshooters, only better at what they do really, and they've got the armour upgrade as well, so they're tougher, they do more damage, and obviously they pull out those armour piercing halberds in melee as well. They may not have a shield, at least they may not have a sort of the same sort of shield value as the sharpshooters. I think the Minotaur Roman Guardians, they only have their shields on their back, whereas the sharpshooters do pull out their shields in melee. So yeah, but the Minotaur Rollmen Guardians, another maybe predictable addition to the Cardland army with their big plate armour, but still, this sort of crossbow triumvirate that they often have going on is very, very damaging if used correctly. And then we have all, pretty much anyway, of the Cardland cavalry units on display today. So we'll have a look over here at the Silver Surfers first of all, which are going to be the Merc crossbows. If these guys don't cause fear in this form, I don't know what will. But obviously the Merc crossbows are very micro-intensive because they don't have a huge amount of range and they're very weak to arrow fire. But when it comes to tilting the balance of a cav fight in favour of Cardland, they are going to be very, very, very key, I think. You know, it's going to be... You're going to need to use them to particularly against very cav-heavy factions like Dol Amroth in order to have much of an advantage. Now you do have the mercenaries, which previously Cardland had no melee cavalry at all. Now they do have the Merc cavalry, but the Merc cavalry are sort of the bog standard melee cavalry. Dol Amroth are able to field their own variant of the Padathil Horse Guard, which are significantly stronger than the Merc cav, and obviously the mercenaries, much like Cardland as a whole, not the best morale, so you do need to support them properly, otherwise they're not going to win you many cav engagements outright against factions that are prepared for such an engagement, but they will at least offer you a defence where previously Cardland had very little. So, you know, they're able to mix it in those terms now. Then we have the 3 units of Lancers, the centre really, the most damaging part of the Cardland cavalry. We have the Horsemen of the Swan Fleet, which previously the Tharbad Riders. Very, very high charge bonus, potentially very, very devastating, but again, much like, you know, they are basically the quintessential Lancer. If you leave them in melee for too long, they'll break, they'll take all sorts of damage, you need to be very careful, but you charge them in quickly, charge them out again, cycle in and out, get that micro down, they're going to do a lot of damage for you. As are, of course, the Dunedain Commandos, although as Dunedain, upgraded Dunedain as well with their armour here, they will do a little bit better overall than the Swan Fleet horses there that we just saw at staying alive, just because obviously Dunedain, a little bit better than standard humans, a little bit more of an analogous to the elves in terms of how they perform, and obviously a little bit of armour on them as well, but they are still Lancers. While they will do better in a cav engagement, they will still not be the most efficient unit you can use. So you do need to be careful there. And then finally, take a good look at this unit model because, you know, obviously the Royal Court of House Thorondor look exactly the same as the unupgraded Dunedain Commanders. This is going to be just the Dunedain Commander unit model moving forward because the Royal Court of House Thorondor do have a new unit model on the way, which is essentially a Cardland variant of the Royal Court of House Armlaith's new unit model, obviously with the Cardland shields and colours, which I'm looking forward to as well. So yeah, Cardland here, we'll see how well they can do. I know that a lot of people think Cardland are a little bit weak, so we'll see how they can get on against 2 very high quality factions here in both Umbar and Dol Amroth. Dol Amroth in particular have received a lot of love from the developers leading up to 0.97, and they are much, much stronger now than they were in 0.96. They could be, overall, from what I've seen so far, my new favourites because of how they've shaped up. We've got some Doran Ernil archers on the front, which basic archers, they will be able to outrange pretty much anything, well, yeah, anything Cardland has. But Cardland, of course, you know, if Cardland get those crossbows into range, it could be a little bit messy. Over here, the Black Swan Renegades, obviously, the Macemen, the heavy infantry Macemen that Dol Amroth can field. Again, I think they are stronger, actually, than the Abrazani Nadi Tariq, but then you do pay a little bit more for them as well. You know, obviously, high-quality units, you have to pay a lot for them, but of all the Macemen on display here today, Dol Amroth have the ones that are the highest quality, but also the ones that are the most expensive. So we'll see if going for this much AP is going to be useful. You'd imagine it would, because Cardland and Umbar are both very heavily armoured factions. A couple of units of Talon Knights, obviously very elite heavy infantry as well. Some Haven Guard, or Guards of the Havens, I should say. Imrahil is not in this unit, actually, interestingly enough. But obviously the Guards of the Havens, one of the most feared heavy swordsmen in the game. And speaking of which, the Champions of Corbas Haven are also here. So again, this is the new Dol Amroth infantry unit, heavy swordsmen, much in the same vein as something like the dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights or the Raven Helms of Caer Andros from Gondor. That sort of thing is the sort of thing you can compare the Champions of Corbas Haven to. And then, naturally, it wouldn't be a Dol Amroth army if they didn't lay the cav on pretty thick. They've got a couple of units here of the Padathil Horse Guard, which, again, a new unit to Dol Amroth, which will give them that much more of an edge in melee combat. Their heavy cavalry is the pride and joy of this faction, and they are stronger than mercenaries and obviously more morale, made of sterner stuff. And this is the unit which is going to give them a pretty big advantage against most factions when it comes to engaging cav to cav in melee. Now there are a few which it will not be quite so cut and dry. Rohan and Khan come immediately to mind with the numbers they can field, but even so, dangerous indeed. some Tirithea Lancers, which again just a more basic Lancer unit, more here for the numbers than anything else. A couple of units of the Perithil Randirim, which of course are the Horse Archer, again a very significant addition to Dol Amroth. You know, one of the problems with Dol Amroth's cavalry in the previous patch, even as strong as it was then, was the fact that it could be kited around easily by any faction that had Horse Archers. Not the case anymore. The Perithil Randirim are fairly expensive as far as Horse Archers go, but also good armour, which a lot of Horse Archers actually forego, especially from the Rohirrim and Khand at the lower tiers. And finally, the Haven Knights, of course, you know, one of the most feared units of cavalry in the game for very good reason. They're very, very difficult to kill, and they're extremely effective in melee against other cavalry, and it's of course a very good place for Imrahil himself to be riding. So, without further ado, let's begin. Again, 16k frames. I felt like going through the army compositions there for a little bit more of an extended period was required, just because obviously it is 0.97 and I do want to get across what's actually happening a little bit more as the development continues. But I'm interested to see how this battle goes. I mean, Cardland have gone much more cavalry heavy than they certainly would have done in 0.96, but even in 0.97, particularly against Dol Amroth, going this cavalry heavy could be seen as a pretty significant risk. But they have 3 units of Lancers, 2 units of basic melee cav, and 2 units of mounted crossbows. But ultimately, I would say, yeah, I mean, he's cycling over here now. I would say that certainly the target that's a little bit more ripe for exploitation would probably be Umbar at the hands of cavalry, in spite of the fact they've got a lot of shields, or spears I should say, shielded spearmen, and halberds. They also have the crossbow corsairs, which have revealed themselves, obviously very, very damaging. But ultimately you won't have to deal with a huge amount of cavalry chasing you down. There's only the Alcarondas faithful, which yes, 1-to-1 would easily be able to defeat anything Cardland has to offer, even the Royal Courthouse Thorondor. But those mounted crossbows could be just the ticket for taking down something like the Alcarondas faithful. A little bit of indecision here on the part of all players, sort of feeling one another out, seeing who they want to engage. And obviously, again, in a sort of 3-way free-for-all like this, it can often be the player that avoids engaging for the longest which ends up doing the best. We'll see how that works out here. After all, Cardland appear to have deployed furthest. I'd say Cardland are kind of in the middle here, so it's unlikely that Cardland will be able to avoid a scrap. Indeed, you can see over here that already Dol Amroth fancies their chances here, it would seem, going in fairly close to engage with the Cardland cav. They do need to be a little bit careful because they won't be quite the same walkovers on horseback that they were in 0.96, and you can see a bit of a love tap there more than anything else. No kills actually scored, but the Perithil Randirim are actually staying in position. You can see here the Horse Guard are also here, so immediately an engagement happening here. So 3 units of the finest Dol Amroth melee cav, including the Haven Knights. Here you can see a combination of the Merc Cav and the Dunedain here, the Royal Courthouse Thorondor also in here. Was that routing? It was. It was the Merc Cavalry already routing, so you can see there the problem that the mercenaries have. They immediately folded before the power of the Perithil Horse Guard, and you can see over here as well that Perithil Randirim sort of cycling around, the Dunedain commanders charging in, and the Dunedain commanders are a very fine cavalry unit, but they are thoroughly outmatched here in melee against the Haven Knights. They need to get out of there before they break. Even the Dunedain will break. They've taken huge losses already to the Dol Amroth horsemen. The Perithil Horse Guard are in here now as well, fighting against the Royal Courthouse Thorondor. So that just goes to show the upgrade that Dol Amroth's cavalry has had. Previously, they would have had to make do with the Merc cavalry as well, but now they have a much stronger option in the Perithil Horse Guard. Kuro's army is still not moving, however, so he's not going to be moving his crossbows into support, which again could be exactly the sort of thing which would do a lot of damage to the Haven Knights pretty quickly. But the Merc cavalry is on the way back, as are the Dunedain commanders. But you can see already those Perithil Randirim, they are pretty expensive for horse archers, as I've said, but a lot of damage on them, and already the Merc cavalry is wavering. They're trying to get in here against the Dol Amroth melee cav, but it's again, this is the power of Dol Amroth. This is exactly the sort of engagement that they will want to try and engage in melee on horseback with their heavy knights. Knights in shining armour. Now the Merc crossbows are here. The Merc crossbows as well, it's a little bit difficult to sort of keep track of where they're firing, but you can see that the Haven Knights are taking losses, and those 2 units of Merc crossbows are doing a substantial amount of damage to the Haven Knights, in fact. And the Merc crossbows, as fragile as they are and as limited as their range actually is, you can see there already the Perithil Randirim. Single volley was really all it took to kill off a few of them. they do have a lot of damage, those Merc crossbows, and they managed to kill off a lot of those Haven Knights. And now over here, the Royal Court of House Thorondor, they are outmatched here though, so the Royal Court of House Thorondor may be a multiple HP Lancer, but here, outnumbered as they are against the Dol Amroth melee cavalry, it's not going too well for them, unfortunately. And now the Haven Knights are back in, the crossbows got pretty far away from the engagement. The Parathil Randirim on Overwatch, so yeah, this is certainly going to be the end of the Royal Court. And this might as well be the last time that we see, as I said, that unit model for the Royal Court of House Thorondor. They've got a much nicer one on the way, which sort of signifies their position as sort of the premier Cardland cavalry unit. A lot more impressive looking. The Parathil Horse Guard are trying to chase down those Merc crossbows, who, caught on their heels a little bit, have now been engaged by the Horse Guard. And of course, this is good news for Umbar more than anyone else, because not only are the two enemy armies taking some fairly substantial losses, but also the Alcarondas Faithful will now be pretty much uncontested on the field. Oh, there goes Imrahil. So the Royal Court of House Thorondor in their final stand managing to kill Imrahil off, and also these Parathil Horse Guard tried to charge in. They did actually kill off a few of the Miniscarithan sharpshooters, but those Cardland crossbows, they're not messing around at close range. The last Samurai immediately springs to mind. But yeah, the Haven Knights going to win, even though the Royal Court of House Thorondor really did give as good as they got there. There's a lot of dead horsemen all over the place now. But I think actually we can start to cycle over here, as Umbar has actually moved in on Dol Amroth. So perhaps seeing Dol Amroth as the bigger threat. I'm actually not sure I'd agree with that. I think that Dol Amroth, while they do have a lot of good infantry to be fair in the Black Swan Renegades, I would be tempted to try and neutralise those Cardland crossbows. Because as Umbar, with all those Abrazani, particularly now with the Cav superiority that's basically been gifted to them, the Alcarondas Faithful now, I mean, there are those Tirathea Lancers, but they're going to get butchered by Alcarondas Faithful in melee. Ooh, and I hear the sound effects of those crossbow Corsairs firing in as well. That's a bold engagement, because that's going to reveal their position to the Doran Ernil Archers, and the crossbow Corsairs will be the ideal target for them. I think Dol Amroth are starting to realise that this is a pretty dicey engagement for them, so I thought those Doran Ernil Archers were actually going to fall back and they were going to try and charge in with their infantry. Umbar would then be caught between the two armies which initially were looking, well, tearing lumps out of one another. Now an alliance of convenience has basically been struck up. They can't allow Umbar to run away with this game, so Cardland threatening the Umbar flank now. Miniscarithan sharpshooters getting into position again. I can see the crossbows having a very distinct impact on this game still. Where did the rest of those Haven Knights go? They might all be dead. I mean, Cardland still has those Merc crossbows as well, so the Alcarondas... Yeah, there are some Haven Knights. So the Alcarondas Faithful might be the single strongest individual cav unit left on the field, but I do suppose that, considering the Horse Archers and the mounted crossbows, it's not going to be quite so easy for them. Bit of a lull in proceedings now as the skirmish fight gets underway. The Doran Ernil Archers just sort of shooting at what they can. What are they going for? I mean, the Corsair crossbows would absolutely be the thing I would choose to go after, and that is what Starling is going for. What was that? Yeah, the Alcarondas Faithful just sort of cycling around. And again, I am interested to see how the Abrazanim focused army actually holds up, and whether or not they would benefit from having those two-handed axemen in this battle, which I imagine they would. Again, Dol Amroth and Cardland, very much factions which focus around having nice armour values. Crossbow Corsairs still being hit by the Doran Ernil Archers. The Parathil Randirim are now over here. All of the Horse Guard were expended in that very bloody exchange with Cardolan towards the northern end of the map. But yeah, I feel as though Umbar, they don't really have a choice but to be more defensive still, because now they are being threatened from two sides. So if they do charge in against Dol Amroth, Cardolan are just going to get in behind them, and it will be a firing squad type situation with those crossbows. Meanwhile, just a singular unit of Doran Ernil Archers, which is, in the long term, is probably not going to be sufficient to sustain this assault, but it looks as though now Dol Amroth, their patience has run out, and they are going to charge into melee, and this is where I'm interested to see how this front line holds up, because Belagai footmen and halberds, it's a good front line, but the infantry from Dol Amroth that's coming towards them is of very high quality. Black Swan Renegades, Talon Knights, Champions of Corbas Haven, and of course the Guards of the Havens as well, which very, very powerful singular infantry unit. So I think it's going to be down to the Abrazanim in all their varieties to actually equalise this fight a little bit as the Dol Amroth infantry comes in. Once again, the Knights in shining armour colliding with this front line. The spears they're going to have no issue with. The halberds might be able to keep them at bay for some time. And Umbar caught on their heels here. You can see that the Parathil Randirim shooting in, and now also the Tirathea Lancers able to get into the cookie jar. They're going to charge right along the crossbow Corsairs. Very bad news. So, you know, Starling catching Dreezy out there, and he is going to be able to kill off those crossbows. He has sacrificed what's left of his Haven Guard to do so. The Alcarondas Faithful will easily kill off what's left of them. But Umbar already here in a bit of a dicey situation. The Tirathea Lancers now charging into the back of this front line, which was already looking pretty dicey. The Talon Knights, those champions, doing very, very well. Over here, slower going for Dol Amroth, but you would imagine that things are going to keep ticking away in their favour as Cardlan also moves in, so it's going to be an interesting time of it now for Umbar. These Tirathea Lancers proving to be a real thorn in their side, although they need to be very, very careful. Getting into melee with Naru Royal Guard is not going to be good for a basic unit of Lancers like this. Yeah, they've lost a lot of men already, so already they've basically been expended, but they've done a very, very good job. Over here, meanwhile, you can see the Parathil Randirim trying to stand up to the Alcarondas Faithful in melee, but they're really not managing it. You can see not a single Alcarondas Faithful has been killed by the Parathil Randirim. I think the only death so far was inflicted by the Haven Guard. No, it wasn't actually. So one of the Alcarondas Faithful was killed, at least one now, by the Parathil, but you can see here the power of the Alcarondas Faithful. Very, very powerful cavalry unit, mopping up those horse archers in melee. Now they're going to be used a little bit more defensively. The Abrazanim Narduzagar repositioning, and the cavalry there already caught out. So I think it's time we actually went down to half speed here. The Narduzagar are now charging in to try and plug the gap which the Tirathea Lancers caused with that rear charge. I'm not sure whether a single unit of them at this point is going to be enough to staunch the bleeding. The Talon Knights and the Champions together proving to be a very potent combination. Still Overwatch fire from the Doran Ernal Archers as well. Over here, this section of the line is actually holding up a little bit better. And again, this has to do with the fact that this section of the line wasn't rear charged. But also the Black Swan Renegades are over here in addition to the Guards of the Haven. So the AP combined with the single strongest Dol Amroth infantry unit, you would imagine is still going to have a pretty catastrophic effect on the Umbar front line, considering, again, the Balagai units are just outmatched here. The Abrazani Nadu Tariq going to try and do their best to patch the line up, but I'm not sure personally. And over here, we have another engagement. Cardinal have kept their formation very, very nicely, actually. Cardinal have kept the same formation as they've moved forward. Cardinal, on the other hand, they aren't quite the same sort of threat in melee here with the composition they've brought as Dol Amroth are. The Miniscarithlin spears going up against the Balagaya halberds and spears. Umbar actually have a bit of an advantage here in the middle. You can see those crossbow bolts trying to kill off this unit of Abrazani Nadubawi. But Cardinal also have fewer infantry units they have to deal with. Now, it is also worth saying that these Merc crossbows could just shoot into the back of this engagement over here and affect the Umbar infantry in a catastrophic way. He could also send these spearmen around here to sort of wrap around. I am at half speed, of course, so I'm able to react much faster than he would be able to in an actual battle situation. And of course, once the sharpshooters are out of ammunition, very, very powerful infantry as well. Well, powerful for what they are, I should say. There's Merc crossbows. Don't think they've actually used any volleys yet. Those Dunedain captains have been committed on the front line, which will be a bit of a difference maker. Now you can see that he is indeed going to move to surround, I think, this Abrazani formation on the front line. And the Abrazani have good morale, and yet they are not enjoying their time going up against the Dunedain captains in particular. Are the spearmen going to rear charge? I think they are. Again, a rear charge from spearmen is maybe not the most devastating thing in the world, but again, there are substantial penalties for being attacked from the rear, and they were already, some of those units were already shaken. Those Nadu Tariq did turn around, but even so, it's looking pretty poor for Umbar. They are now over here. They're actually pushing through the line, but the problem is all of these Cardlan skirmishes are good in melee, so as soon as they engage in melee, it's still going to be a struggle for Umbar. Meanwhile, over here, these forces, these men from Dol Amroth, Umbar at this point don't really have too much of an answer for this. I think the Merc crossbows at this point are out of ammunition and they're just going for the... Actually, no, they're not. They do still have ammo. But they are charging around, going for the low-hanging fruit, trying to rout off what's left of the Umbar skirmishers, and they are having a good amount of success at doing so. And yeah, Umbar at this point, very much on their last legs. The Alcarondas faithful are over there, but they've taken damage. And again, a lot of that can be attributed to the crossbows, who are actually dead in mid-air. Nope, now they've fallen. Very strange indeed. But yeah, the Alcarondas faithful. This is the problem with having a unit. Well, there goes. I believe that was the Umbar general over there. But that's the problem with having a unit like the Alcarondas faithful. Individually, they're very powerful. But a low unit count means when you lose a unit model, comparatively speaking, a huge proportion of the unit's strength is gone as well. Especially when you've got a lot of crossbows like Cardland have, it's more easy to focus down a unit of this type. Yeah, Razani, Nadu, Tariq are wavering. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. There's still a fairly decent chunk of the Umbar infantry over here, but you can see there the Umbar forces largely scattered to the four winds at this point. The Nadu Bawi were trying to sort of reform. The Royal Guard are still alive, and over here this section of the Umbar infantry is just being slowly finished off by the Talon Knights and the Champions. But Dol Amroth are in a good position here, I think, going into the late game. They have a lot of strong infantry left alive, and they've now got their Talon Knights into the back lines, although maybe overextending a little bit there. The Talon Knights are strong, but I mean, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, all of those mace men in melee as well, the halberds. Maybe a little bit more support was needed before they charged into the Lion's Den like this. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are going to keep that morale up as well. The problem is going to be over here though. The Umbar forces have just routed off almost immediately. And the problem here, the Black Swan Renegades, that AP, it's going to be ideal for going up against the Miniscarithan Spearmen. A little bit less so against the Dunedain Captains, who are immediately moving to have an honourable duel with the Guards of the Havens by the looks of things. But yeah, I think if Cardland are going to win this, they need to position their crossbows in such a position where they carve into that Dol Amroth infantry. Because if it just comes down to a pure brawl in melee, I think Dol Amroth have got this battle fairly well won at this point. But crossbows are a real strength of Cardland, and will it be enough to see them over the line here? Because those Merc crossbows are trying to kill off these Talon Knights, and they are actually shaken. Caught between the Hearthguard and the Miniscarithan spears. The Minotaur Roman Guardians have got their halberds down. And these Haven Guard, the Guards of the Havens, are a little bit overextended at this point. There's all sorts of men around them, including macemen, halberds, and the Dunedain Captains. Some Champions of Corbas Haven on the way over now. What's happening down here? Still an engagement happening. The Talon Knights will slowly cut their way through the Abrazani. The Champions of Corbas Haven trying to cut their way through the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard, which they should manage with the numbers being what they are. So Umbar, I think it's fair to say, probably not. I mean, it would be a remarkable victory if they were able to pull it off. But Dol Amroth are really going to be relying on the strength of their infantry, and they may have overextended themselves a little bit here, because the Guards of the Havens, they're in a sticky situation, it must be said. And over here, these archers trying to get into a position potentially, they might be out of ammo with how much they've been shooting. But it doesn't matter either way, because now they're routing a combination of a charge from the Silver Surfer mercenary crossbows, and the Dunedain Captains, of course, is enough to see them routing off. Over here, these Talon Knights are still wavering, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul doing their best in melee, and that is going to be enough to rout them, so a good victory for them there. The problem that they will have, I think, is that this unit of Miniscarithan Spearmen is only going to be able to hold back this blob of Black Swan Renegades for too long. And as far as Mace Men goes, the Black Swan Renegades will be very good support indeed. But now Sharpshooters, the Champions of Corbas Haven, are moving in over here to try and engage with the Miniscarithan Sharpshooters. But again, there's another unit of crossbows over here in support. Dol Amroth are desperately trying to shut down all these units of crossbows. I feel as though the damage they've already done, there's a volley there into the Belagaya Spearman, interestingly enough, from the Miniscarithan Sharpshooters. Yeah, the Guards of the Haven, they're very stretched at this point. The mighty swordsmen from Dol Amroth, the Minotaur Roman Guardians, they still have ammunition, which is not good news for Dol Amroth at all. More reinforcements are on their way over now. The Dunedain Captains charged in, but now they are going to be surrounded in turn by the Champions of Corbas Haven, the second unit of them. And based on the relative numbers, the Champions should have the advantage in this battle. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are over here as well, but they're also starting to look a little bit thin on the ground in terms of numbers. They're very resilient, but they're not exactly the fastest at killing things, as most spearmen are. Naru Na'aru Royal Guard are over here, so I think, by the looks of things, it might be that Dol Amroth and Umbar can sort of collaborating at this point because... Oh, there goes the Cardinal General. Killed at the hands of the Black Swan Renegades, and that doesn't surprise me because if Cardin's crossbows are allowed to just keep firing unchecked, they will win the battle for Cardin. Meanwhile, over here, the champions of Cobas Haven simply don't have the numbers to take on the Miniscarithnan sharpshooters in melee anymore. And as soon as they're free to start firing again, you can bet they will. But this is the problem with Cardin. Their general's gone, their inspiration units are very depleted, and now their Miniscarithnan units are routing and broken. Those champions, those mercenary crossbows rear-charging the Talon Knights. The Minotaur Roman Guardians are still going to be a tough nut to crack though, especially with that armour upgrade, very resilient. And from the front, you'd imagine they'd be just fine with any engagement that comes their way. The Hearthguard of Amon-Sul finally succumbing to the stresses of the battles they've been in. The Talon Knights now trying to sort of rear-charge and kill them off more quickly. Minotaur Roman Guardians are going to pull out their crossbows once again, however. Oh, those Miniscarithnan sharpshooters are routing. There's a huge clump here of champions of Cobas Haven. 1 unit of 8, 1 unit of 59 there. Minotaur Roman Guardians are going to shoot into that blob over there. Some of these Cardin forces might return. There's still a single Haven Guardsman here. And that's a very nice volley indeed. The mercenary crossbows are here also. They need to keep it up, these mace men. And they've managed to finish off the Haven Guard. They are shaken though, so it's not going to take much to rout them off, and they could get a lot of friendly fire here. They are going to charge. Yeah, there's a lot of friendly fire, and that might be enough to rout them. I don't know, it's a lot of work for those crossbows to do. The Minotaur Roman Guardians at this point, they're going to have to keep them penned up in this blob for a while. There is still a single Haven Guardsman there, actually. I was mistaken, he's still in melee. The Cav, I think, is just going to have to try and charge in and stop the charge. It's a firing squad here. They're just going to get out of there. The Miniscarithnan sharpshooters are still alive, as are the crossbows. The Merc crossbows on horseback, and they still have a bit of ammo as well. They are going to stop those crossbowmen from being charged into. This one Haven Guard is still just slowly but surely trying to work his way through these sharpshooters. He's just parrying him like a god. Or a point-blank volley. It is going to be a point-blank volley. It is Talon Knights in melee though, and the fact that these sharpshooters are already shaken, that might be the difference maker, you know, but the crossbows are still... Yeah, I think Cardin are just about going to hold their nerve, because now all of these crossbows in the late game, the fact that they still had enough ammunition to keep up this pressure, I think that's going to be it. I think that's going to be all they need. It's just the sharpshooters that are left, but those maces, just a very small amount of Talon Knights left alive. Those Black Swan Renegades are routing. The Merc crossbows positioning themselves, and the Talon Knights rout. I mean, there are still some Umbar forces, so that's Dol Amroth the first to fall, technically speaking. Do Umbar still have anything left over here? No, Dol Amroth cleaned up all of that. So this is the only surviving challenge for Cardin to overcome. A unit of 41 Balagaya footmen. And you would imagine that this isn't going to be too much of a problem as soon as the crossbows get into range. The Balagaya footmen probably won't last too much longer, especially not with the rest of their army already gone. The morale is not going to be to the same standards that Umbar usually have. Umbar, of course, usually have good morale, as do Dol Amroth, but Cardin, in spite of the clear morale issues that they did have in that battle, they managed their strengths well, and they're ultimately going to win this fight. And if I would assume if people were asked to pick a winner on the .97 build anyway, they probably would have gone for Dol Amroth out of these three factions. This is a good sort of representation of what Cardin can do. And this was when they went cavalry heavy against Dol Amroth as well, not something you would necessarily normally do. Yeah, surely they're not going to last too much longer. They're shaken, they're just getting shot. Dreezy's just sat here letting it happen. He has accepted his fate. Bolts flying in. This is going to be a nasty volley. Oof, and there they go. Cardin crossbows, MVPs here. The Miniscarithnan sharpshooters, the now departed Minotaur Roman Guardians, and the mounted crossbows as well. Mounted crossbows are very micro-intensive, but they prove to be a good addition here. They not only allow Cardland to stand up to Dol Amroth's cavalry longer than they otherwise would, they also facilitated pretty much the ability to hold the line in the late game against a Dol Amroth and Umbar onslaught. So let's have a look at what did the damage for Cardland, and Sharpshooters and the Minotaur Roman Guardians all getting very similar amounts of kills, in fact 2 of them getting exactly the same level of kills, as did the Merc crossbows, so all of them getting a very similar level, sort of around the mid 100s. The rest of the army, not as much. Sort of, you don't expect Miniscarithlan Spearmen to get a huge amount of kills on foot, especially not against a more quality focused Dol Amroth and Umbar infantry force. The rest of the cavalry as well had a bit of a torrid time of it against the Dol Amroth cav, with the exception of the Royal Court of House Thorondor, which actually did okay. You know, their multiple HP keeping them in the fight for a little bit longer. Hearthguard of Amon Sul did okay as well, as a sort of morale battery, as it were. And of course the Dunedain captains in melee, which were one of the things which really allowed them to hold the line against Umbar earlier on. So yeah, that's a nice little preview there for 0.97. As I said, Umbar will be looking a lot different in the future with the changes that are coming their way with regards to their Corsair units and their Corsair, Belagai and Abrazanim units all getting a substantial overhaul. And also, you know, Dol Amroth still very strong, but I feel as though this replay is also good for Microsoft OneNote playing Hearts of Iron 4. Interesting. But yeah, I feel as though this was a good showcase for Cardinal, because I do feel as though Cardinal are one of those factions which people underestimate because they think, bad morale, you know, their infantry's not quite as good as the other Western Kingdoms of Men, you know, I'd rather play Arthedain or someone like that. But Cardinal have got their strengths, and the crossbows are obviously the most obvious one. The crossbows certainly really helped them win this, but also the cav. The cav is better than people give it credit for. It's damaging, the lances are very, very good, and those Merc crossbows and those Merc cavalrymen can make life a little bit more difficult, even for a very strong cavalry faction like Dol Amroth. You saw how quickly those Horse Guard tore through the Mercs, and still Cardland didn't give in. So yeah, good fight all around. Thank you to Kuro for sending this one to me. Obviously it's always good to see stuff on 0.97. And over the weekend there will be the update made, I think. If not, then it will follow shortly on after, so that'll be Umbar's changes and obviously a few other things as development continues. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully we can see a bit more of 0.97 in the future as well, or in the near future I should say. And yeah, hope you'll join me for whatever is next.